Federal prosecutors have officially filed criminal charges against freshman Republican Representative George Santos. Now, these are charges brought forward by the Department of Justice. And while we don't know what the exact charges are, we do know that he will appear in court this week. According to CNN's reporting on this, the exact nature of the charges couldn't immediately be learned, but the FBI and the Justice Department public integrity prosecutors in New York and Washington have been examining allegations of false statements in Santos's campaign finance filings and other claims. And so, as I mentioned, he is very likely to appear in court this week. In fact, as early as tomorrow, Santos is expected to appear as soon as Wednesday at federal court in New York's Eastern District, where the charges have been filed under seal, which is why we don't know what the exact charges are at this moment, but we will learn pretty soon, I imagine. Now, this comes after Santos has been under investigation in multiple jurisdictions and by the House Ethics Committee. In fact, the Federal Election Commission was also investigating George Santos, but the DOJ reached out to the government agency and let them know, hey, we got this, we're getting involved now, and we're gonna take over this investigation now. And I do think that this is very likely gonna have to do with some potential financial crimes, whether it's campaign finance or literally stealing money through charitable efforts that he started. So for instance, there are allegations that he broke campaign finance laws. There are allegations that he violated federal conflict of interest laws. There have also been some accusations regarding his charitable organization. He had allegedly raised money for an Iraq War veteran's dog, and apparently that money never went to the veteran. That's what the accusation is. So there's a lot going on here. There's also the accusation that he was the mastermind behind a credit card fraud scheme. There's a lot to get into, but we'll see how this all plays out. And I'm glad that the Department of Justice is doing its job and going after this guy who very clearly loves to lie to people, but also potentially scam people.
Okay, so lying as a politician is not a crime.
It's the most protected thing in the world.
Yeah, by the way, legally, constitutionally, and through the law, Anna's right, it is the most protected thing. Politicians are allowed to lie in Congress, they're allowed to lie on air, they're allowed to lie in their ads, they're allowed to lie nonstop, and they do. If you were gonna arrest politicians for lying, you'd have to arrest at least 500 out of the 535 people in Congress. And so now the mainstream media won't tell you that. They say those are beloved, honorable politicians. There's only a couple of them who lie, like George Santos and Donald Trump. No, that's not remotely true. Both Republicans and Democrats lie, and they lie in a massive way, okay? That's not the issue here. So the issue is you still are not allowed to break laws. And so what are the laws that are potential here? Again, that we don't have the leak for, we know that the case is coming, but they do not have the information on what the charges are. But we can easily speculate, as Anna began to do there. So first of all, when you run a scam charity, that's fraud. And if you did that and you're not part of the establishment or the elites or anything like that, you're definitely going to jail, okay? So Santos is in Congress now, but they've really kind of shunned him. So he doesn't have a big power base. So he's left a little bit exposed. So they can pursue fraud charges against him in a criminal fashion. Now remember, Donald Trump has already admitted to fraud and paid a giant civil settlement. He did that on a couple of fronts. He ran a fake charity and a fake university. And he had to admit that they were both fake and that he was basically just using it to steal people's money. And he paid giant settlements for it, but he didn't go to jail. Why? Because he was definitely part of the elites in the establishment, even though he claims to be against the establishment. The fact that he's powerful protected him from going to jail. Santos does not have that kind of protection. So if he's convicted of a criminal fraud, probably he will go to jail, okay? So that's point number one. Point number two is campaign finance laws are real and necessary because look, we nearly legalized bribery because you could give literally over $100 million in campaign contributions, and they could funnel a lot of that money to their own properties, to their own businesses, as Donald Trump did. But you still can't just break those laws and take bribes or take ill-gotten money and put it into your own campaign. depending on the definition of ill-gotten, etc. Right? There are some laws, and you need those laws so that they don't do out-and-out bribery and go, forget the $100 million in campaign contributions. Here's $100 million in your pocket.
Exactly.
Okay. Right. So I would hope that Republicans who love the slogan "Drain the Swamp" would agree with us that that kind of corruption is unacceptable, right? So they must enforce those laws. Again, there's always a Donald Trump exception because Republicans who generally hate corruption, the Republican voters, which I give them credit for, when it comes to Donald Trump, they go, no, he's allowed to break campaign finance laws. It's no big deal that he did that with Stormy Daniels, etc. But Santos does not get the exception, so he could be in significant trouble.
In fact, in the past, there have been lawmakers, people who have been elected into office who broke campaign finance laws, were prosecuted and went to prison for it, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember specific examples, but it has happened. It's not unprecedented. And these are politicians who were considered far more, I guess, credible, far more powerful than George Santos is at this very moment.
Yeah, there's a guy named James Traficant who broke a number of laws. I forget exactly if it was campaign finance or fraud or combination thereof. He went to prison. He ran from prison. There, Duke Cunningham, a Republican from California, did massive fraud.
Yep.
He has one of my favorite stories. On his way to the press conference to cry that he found Jesus and regrets it, he took a laundry bag full of cash and threw it out of his car onto his wife's lawn. And then apparently on the drive from the laundry bag to the press conference, he found Jesus. Okay, so there's been crooks in Congress for a long, long time. George Santos comes from a rich tradition, okay? And my point about having his feet in both camps, he's credible these days because in the establishment's mind, because he's a congressman. But the rest of Congress rejects him and the rest of the establishment rejects him. So he's not quite credible. So there might be a compromise because this is all about power, guys. It isn't about the truth, right? The compromise might be, okay, no, you can't run again and you're driven out of Congress. But you did run a nice scam and you did get one foot inside the establishment. So it's not like we're gonna put you in prison like a regular person. So that might be the compromise here, but we're a long way away from there.
So we'll see how this plays out. Kevin McCarthy was asked to comment about the criminal charges. And apparently he said that they will look into the charges before determining if he thinks Santos should be removed from Congress. Quote, I'll look at the charges, the California Republican said, so.
Okay, one last thing. The giant hypocrisy of the media. John McCain is one of the most famous people to be involved in campaign finance violations. He was part of a giant scam and he got caught, okay? And it nearly ended his career. He was part of 5 Congress people who were caught in that scam where he was gonna take money. That's why he later pretended to be a champion of getting money out of politics. Okay, because he actually was the guy who was involved in a scam to get money for his votes. Did he get the George Santos treatment from the media?
He did not.
He did not. Even though he has probably the most famous case. Why didn't he get that treatment? Because he loves wars, he loves tax cuts for the rich, he loves giving everything away to the powerful, or he did. And that's why to this day, if you speak ill of John McCain anywhere, the mainstream, forget the right wing, remember he's a Republican. The mainstream media will turn around and just rip your head off. How dare you? John McCain is holy. So understand the hypocrisy here as they pile on George Santos, but leave all their corrupt buddies alone. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.